Alex Totten, St Johnstone manager. Remember Alex Totten, St Johnstone manager? Him and Walter up in court for having a square go in the touchline. And the two of them are peeing themselves laughing when they're having a fly laugh to themselves as they come out the court because they knew the two of them had been stupid and they'd enjoyed themselves on the day, but they got in trouble with the police and they're coming down the steps at the Perth the courts and they have seen them straighten out. We better sort of, so there's the press down there, we better start looking guilty and all that. They'd get after it. But Alex Totten, assistant manager at Rangers, caretaker manager at Rangers, great guy. He was St Johnstone manager, I think it's late 80s, early 90s. I'm getting to my age. The dates all kind of merge into each other. Don't quote me. I'm sure he got them to third in the league. I'm sure he got them right up there in the top flight, Alex Totten. I'm sure he got St Johnstone up to third in the league. Like they finished third in the league one season, I'm sure. And they just moved to McDermott, to their new stadium and all that, and then they sacked him. I don't know if it was straight afterwards they brought in John McClelland, their ex-captain, Northern Ireland International. John McClelland, ex of Rangers, became St Johnstone manager, and it didn't really work out. I don't know if it was straight after Alex Totten or just in the subsequent seasons, but they went kind of downhill for a bit after that. There was Alex Smith, famous Aberdeen manager, won the Scottish Cup with St Mirren in 1987, then he goes to Aberdeen, ends up Aberdeen manager in the post-Ferguson era, and he wins the League Cup and the Scottish Cup in the same season. And he takes Aberdeen to Ibrox. They only require a point to win the title, which they'd won, 1980, 1984, 1985. So in 1991, that felt really recent. They're a little bit literally entitled in that era, Aberdeen. So they just need a draw to win the title. Rangers have got a lot of injuries, and Aberdeen, a proper force in Scottish football back then, as they always will be, Aberdeen, but they couldn't do it, of course. Famous the two Mark Hateley goals. There's no roof in the main stand, and it's just as well because it would probably get blown off by the noise that day. But Rangers win the league, and that was kind of the end of the road for Alex Smith. And can you imagine that now? Aberdeen sacking the manager because he'd taken it to the last day of the season, the title race, and he was winning the Scottish Cup and the League Cup in the same season. That's just a bit. Compared to what had happened under Alex Ferguson, Aberdeen fans still had this big image of themselves, this idea of what they should be doing, even though the Alex Ferguson reign was a complete freak in Aberdeen's history. But not away he went. Alex Smith gets sacked. Craig Brown, Scotland. I was at the press conference where Craig Brown was forced to announce his resignation. I think I've mentioned this. I'll not go into it again. And it was a horrible thing the way he was treated that day, because at that point in time it was only him and Andy Roxburgh. And Craig Brown was assistant to Andy Roxburgh, but Andy Roxburgh was doing it as manager, getting us to a Euros and a World Cup. The two of them did that. And Craig Brown gets us to a Euros. And the record in qualifying, I remember the record in qualifying for Euro 96 was unbelievable. I think it was only France out of all the teams that qualified through the qualifying campaign had a better defensive record than Scotland. Well, a remarkable record with what was regarded as a kind of weakened Scottish team compared to teams in the past. It's always the same. The weaker the team gets, the more they qualify. Jim Baxter never played in a World Cup, but Craig Brown, he get basically hounded, laughed out the door. Did Craig Brown as Scotland manager, and we didn't qualify for anything else for another 22 years after that. Derek McInnes, even, who I don't know where he is just now. He just got another job, Derek McInnes, but I'm too involved in the World Cup. I can't be bothered with the club stuff just now, but when he was at Aberdeen, qualifies them for European football 8 years in the trot. This is the 20-teens into the early 2020s. Aberdeen had been terrible for most of the 21st century. They were they only qualified for Europe 3 or 4 times, getting slaughtered at home by Banica Strava, or whoever it was. Was it Banica Strava? Sigma Olomouc? I think maybe Sigma Olomouc gave them a going over. Czech team, Slovakian team, something like that, and I think they beat them 5-0 when Mark McGee was the manager. Anyway, Derek McInnes comes in, total stability. Rangers are in the lower leagues, but he wins them their first major honour in like 20 years with a League Cup, and he's getting up to the second in the league like 4 times or something like that. Take them to cup finals. Celtic are totally dominant. Can't win anything more than that one League Cup, but eventually has a little bad run of form, and Aberdeen fans are just sick of him. They're just sick of looking at him, so away he goes. They get rid of him, and it's Stephen Glass. The next thing they're getting put out the Scottish Cup by Darvel. So the base level of success all these guys brought to the team or the club or the national team they were in charge of, I think it brought about delusions of grandeur to the people who'd appointed them or who were technically in charge of them or above them, and the supporters of that team or that club, to the point where they kind of hounded them out and then just watched the delusions come crashing down round about them. There's a tension always when it comes to managerial sackings, resignations, appointments, between what you want as a club, what you think you're entitled to, and what you are actually entitled to, what you're capable of doing, and how you go about doing it. And I don't know. Our problem, we're watching Cape Verde qualifying for the knockout rounds. They're going to play the holders, Argentina, Cape Verde, in the World Cup finals in the last 32. A magnificent thing for Cape Verde. It was a population of 500,000 or something, or 400,000. I never really checked into it because it sickens me to know that somebody with an even smaller population than us is going to be staying on at the World Cup. I think Scotland's problem comes from the Scotland national team, comes from not having a small enough or big enough idea of ourselves. Who are we supposed to be? What is our level? What's our ambitions? When is it absolutely pathetic? What level of failure is just unacceptable? And what level of achievement is acceptable? And what's our ultimate aim? Where do we think we should be? And how do we go about it? Who can actually make it happen is the really important thing. And who forces you to face up to your limitations? That's the best person. The best person is, I remember Dick Advocaat getting Rangers into the Champions League after years of us. Walter Smith only got us a goal away for the final, but then he had a lot of bad Champions League campaigns, so we'll get rid of him. We'll get in a continental manager. And Dick Advocaat came in and need much more money, I think, than Walter at times. And certainly he was told, basically, Dick Advocaat, to get us to do as well as possible in Europe. That was his main aim. And he consistently proved just how far we could get, and also how far away we were from getting to. We're hitting the crossbar and all that against Bayern Munich, but Bayern Munich, like the German national team, like Brazil, the world is populated by opposition teams who took them really close but didn't quite get past them. But we obviously knew we'd beaten Bayern Munich in the semi-final in the past. That goes into the final the one time we won a European trophy. So it's complicated. It's complicated if you judge how you judge whether you're doing well enough or not. But I think Scotland, the Scotland national team, as long as I've known it, which is nearly 50 years now, it should be easier than it is versus smaller nations. We seem to think it should be easier. We're only beaten Haiti by a single goal. We're only beaten Zaire by 2-0 back in 1974, and we beat New Zealand 5-2. But still, they let them back into the game now in 1982. It should be we should definitely not be losing to Costa Rica. It should be easier against the smaller nations, and we make it look easy. We make it look as if we know exactly what we're doing, like we're a proper football nation, or we used to anyway, when we come up against the big guns. I've seen us beating Spain at Hampden in both the World Cup qualifiers and the European Championship qualifiers, 40 years apart. It's not just a one-off thing. I've seen us beating, or drawing 0-0 with Portugal at Hampden in the World Cup qualifiers and in the Nations League. One time it was a bit of a disaster, a bit of letdown, and the latter time it was a phenomenal result because Cristiano Ronaldo's playing and he scores against everybody. But we never went far enough in tournaments when I was a young man, when I was a kid, and then in my 20s, to feel that not qualifying for them was a disaster. That it was, in fact, there was no expectation to go much further, most of the time. So it was just, we're in a tournament, that's great. No. In fact, our biggest crisis came from losing our first match at a World Cup in 20 years. That was Peru. We lost to Peru in the 1978 World Cup. That was the first time we'd lost our first match at a World Cup since 1958. Or the first time we'd lost a match, it was since the 58 World Cup. We lost to France in the last game in that one, as well as losing to Paraguay in 58. But Peru beat us 3-1 because we didn't know how big, how decent a country they were. And we hadn't been to the World Cup since the 50s, up until 1974. That seemed like a long time back then. It's like 16 years. And then we've gone 28 years between the World Cups this time. But because it's the colour TV period, it doesn't seem as long somehow when you look at it historically. It doesn't feel as long, but it's much longer. Our biggest crisis, I think, came from losing our first match at a World Cup in 20 years. Peru beating us 3-1 because we didn't actually know understand how big they were. I don't really know. It's incredible because Peru had got to the quarterfinals in 1970, and Cubillas was just a sensational footballer amongst many in that team. That then led to us drawing with the true minnows of that group in 1978, Iran, whose kind of players ended up getting name checked by Claire Danes and Mandy Patinkin in Homeland 40 years later. I'm sitting there going, there's no escape for this. I'm watching Homeland. I'm watching this. It's like a spy thriller type series that's on Channel 4. Remember, if you don't know if you watched it, just take it away from the world of football. And they're fucking shoving Scotland's calamity at 1978 right in my face. This evil Iranian operative. And the way they got to him was by sussing out his right into football, and he gives himself code names based on the 1978 Iran World Cup team. They literally said that on Homeland. Like, fucking give me a break here. We suddenly felt so much worse about ourselves after losing to Peru, which we shouldn't have in that opening game of that World Cup, missing a penalty and all that, taking the lead, then getting beat 3-1. So we got into this game against Iran, and I totaled down. There was about 8,000 folk there. Did you see the Talleres? The Talleres flag for the Argentina game against that's the ground that we, because we suddenly felt so much worse about ourselves than we actually were. If we'd known how good Peru were, never mind getting a better result against them, we wouldn't have felt as bad. We'd have focused on beating Iran. Just beat Iran. And then you can go and do that impossible result against the Dutch and you'll definitely be through. But we thought we'd win the 1978 World Cup when we're so far off it. We were a kind of laughing stock, and optimism was banned for decades in Scotland. The qualifying became more regular just as our idea of ourselves went through the floor. And we became as poor a national team as we felt safe with. You know what I mean? No chance of getting too ahead of ourselves with this lot. There's no chance of getting too ahead of ourselves with this lot of players. They're just bad enough that they'll not make a fool of us. Kind of this really perverse attitude coming in with the Scotland national team. This is as I'm growing up and getting more and more into football. I started off, my first memory is 78, and it was just, we're going to win the World Cup. Oh no, we're the worst team in the world. And after that, there was just this kind of qualify, let's get to 1982 World Cup, but let's not make too much a big deal about it. Oh, Brazil have beaten us 4-1. We shouldn't have tried to play them at football. It was like a national crisis, a psychological, a mass kind of psychosis. But there's no chance of getting too ahead of ourselves with this lot of players. It was like Kenny Dalglish, Alan Hansen, Willie Miller and Alec McLeish, the great Aberdeen team of Alec Ferguson. They were populating that team as well. Like Jim Bett and Davy Cooper going in there as kind of adjuncts to this team, wee add-ons. Unbelievable. But we kept qualifying. So we kept slagging ourselves till eventually there was no danger of public embarrassment. There was no big summers. By the time we go to France 98, the Tartan Army thing, the Doa Deer, self-mocking, self-deprecation, probably gone too far. Has just, it's a legacy thing. It's gone through generations. It's kind of morphed into, metastasized into something far darker than just one, like the odd one guy out of 20,000 wearing a kind of really bad kilt with a pair of sand shoes, and just for a laugh, everybody was wearing it as a uniform. The kind of what had been the daft thing was now, I was seriously wearing the kilt and all that, but there is no way we're singing songs about winning unless it's like, we're getting beat by Brazil. Oh, we're going to beat you 4-3. We're going to win 4-3 when you're 3-0 down to Brazil. That kind of thing was okay, but it was a strange combination, all about a mindset that eventually led to us not qualifying for anything for 22 years. So we'd kept ourselves at home, at least keeping our shame kind of private. Argentina 78 was too confusing. It was too confusing and nadir for us to realise there was no such thing. It was no such thing. It wasn't that bad. Argentina 78. It was bad at the time, but only because we had excessive expectations of it. But it was too weird for it to become like, I don't know, post-war Germany, like 1945 Germany, where they'd just been completely flattened and defeated. So they had no choice but to start again. There was no danger of having any overblown idea of yourself, because they'd just seen what had happened to that. What happens when you get an overblown idea of yourself? And I real national, I'm talking like a political and economic level, but they get the Wirtschaftswunder and all that, and they end up becoming an economic powerhouse of Europe, and the football, the national teams and the club teams definitely benefit from that as well. But they got a clear sign, a clear moment. I'm not saying we want to have a world war again, but it's an OTT comparison, it's an OTT metaphor, really, analogies. But they could begin rebuilding because there was nothing left anyway. But we beat the Dutch in 1978, who went on to play in their second straight final. We kept qualifying for tournaments. We were like the kind of German communists and Marxists and other revolutionaries in November 1918, waiting for the inevitable triumph of the proletariat. Sack Ali MacLeod and we'll return to Willie Ormond 1974. But it didn't happen. Like it didn't happen for the Spartacists and Karl Liebknecht and the Free Socialist Republic that he declared on the balcony. It's there in Berlin. They've kept that balcony that Karl Liebknecht. It was the first time I went to Berlin. It was over on the old DDR building. I only went to Berlin after the wall came down. I didn't get there before the wall came down. And the old Schloss was a total. The DDR had knocked that down. It'd been bombed to bits anyway, but they had no intention of rebuilding it because it represented the height of kind of capitalism, craven capitalism, which had caused all the problems of the world. So that was left in ruins, but they built this new kind of East German, a palace of modern East German progressive communist ideas, but they kept the portico, they kept the little balcony that Karl Liebknecht had gone up and declared basically a German Soviet in November 1918, which it took about 2 months for the Tommy Robinsons of the world in Germany back in that day to murder him and Rosa Luxemburg and all that. But the first time it was across this wasteland, and it was out there in this old DDR kind of admin building, and it was slammed in there, the one bit they kept of the old Schloss, and it was weird. And you go back, like best part of 20 years later, I was back there last summer in Berlin, the fourth or fifth time I've been to Berlin on holiday, and it's just right across. They rebuilt the Schloss, which is absolutely amazing. But also now you have this thing where people wish they'd rebuilt the old East German council building. So the old East German Schloss, the old East German, I can't remember what it was called. They used to have nicknames for it and all that, because it was kind of fun to bits and all that. But it was this palace of what you could do, the wonders of communism. But it's just right across the road. It's all part of this lovely, the sun's beating down and all that, and somehow it looks more ordinary, that balcony in there. It's overshadowed in many ways by the Schloss, the rebuilt Schloss, just across the road that it faces onto, but it's also absorbed into, and it's all part of our history, and I feel as if that's what we need. Less this kind of looking at, I don't know what it is we're looking at. The Victorian periods, when, the Wembley Wizards in 1928 and stuff like that. What is it? It's over 100 years ago, that stuff. We need to get used to how bad we've been as well as how good we've been. It's become a more organic thing than just that shit, start again. There needs to be something, take the successes through, take the bad stuff through as well, but know how to use it. It's just, I feel there's too many restarts, there's too many. Jock Stein to Craig Brown was an extended kind of Weimar Republic for the Scotland national team, that whole period. But Morocco in St Etienne in 1988, that was our Wall Street crash and everything. Everything fell to pieces everything from then until Euro 2020 was Hitler and World War II. I mean, it wasn't quite as bad as that, the Holocaust and stuff like that, but that was 5-6 years that the World War II actually lasted. But because it wasn't quite as bad as World War II, Scotland not getting to the World Cup lasted kind of nearly 6 times longer than that, more than 5 times longer than that, just to stretch out the pain. The German Marxists and the revolutionaries, the intellectuals, they fled, and they became the Frankfurt School. They fled Germany post-war, studying what actually went wrong in 1918 when the conditions for a communist revolution were absolutely perfect. Why did it not happen then? They fled to, of all places, America, the den of capitalism, and Herbert Marcuse ended up in San Diego, but they were still known as the Frankfurt School. And one of them, Theodore Adorno, called Walt Disney the most dangerous man in America. And in the same state as Disney World, Scotland, whose best previous result versus Brazil in the World Cup came in Frankfurt, seemed to have confirmed we finally found our Adorno or Marcuse or Horkheimer. Walter Benjamin was lost as he tried to get out of France as well in 1998. I'm stretching this. He's called Steve Clarke, and he knows just how shite we are, and he knows why we fail, and he knows how to stop it because he's studied it, and he knows how we never return to the arrogance of 1978, of the depression of 1998 to 2022. You respect the minnows, you never fear the giants, but you claw and you bitch and you moan and you foul and you just fight to climb, get every little inch you can against them. There's always going to be occasional slip-ups along the way, but you keep trying to pull yourself forward until you understand exactly how big you can be and you believe it. If we go 22 years without a major tournament, and then by the time we have reached 3 major tournaments in the space of 5 years, we're hounding out the guy who took us back to the very limit of all our previous capabilities. It's a strange reaction. A very weird time to get entitled, to suddenly think, no, sorry, we're better than this, when we literally never have been. The very reason we're sacking Steve Clarke is because he kind of gets into the second round that we have never been in. We're not sacking him, he's resigned, but you know. And B, you'd better be fucking sure of what you want next, and who you want next. And that kind of ending a coaching tenure, which has taken us to our historical limit more times than any other. If you get rid of him, we're going to advance. When he's the guy that's got us there 3 times, no other coach has got us to the first round, where we can launch the attack on history. Nobody else has got us there 3 times. He's got to go. You know, well, who proves that he's got to go? What has happened in our history to prove that he's got to go? No Billy Gilmore. No, to hold the ball up against Haiti. Maybe give us that bit more of a base so we can properly beat them. I don't know, though. The heat, the weather certainly didn't suit us over there. Brazil and Morocco being in our group, like 2 top 10 teams in the world, as well as Haiti. The draw seems weird, it seems tough, but it's... Of all the problems facing our men's national team, surely Steve Clarke is the last thing we need to revolutionise. The last thing we need to change. The real revolution has to be at grassroots level. It's like, for me, it's like a mother who's married to a functioning alcoholic father, high-functioning alcoholic father, not leaving the father, not getting rid of him, you know, but taking out the kids, making sure that when they're in public, they show no signs of the trauma they're going through at home because their dad's drinking. You know, it's no dealing with the real problem. It's just making the face of it. It's a superficial and possibly wrong problem. You've just... I think we're just embarrassed because when we get to finals, the failure becomes more public. The whole world's watching. You know, most of the world doesn't care. They're not expecting anything else of us anyway. But it becomes more embarrassing. And the Scotland support has developed this thing over the tartan army. They're always trying to get ahead of the bat. They're trying to embarrass ourselves first. We're trying to mock ourselves before anybody else can. You know, it's just... We were just 1 goal short. We were just 1 goal short if you're talking about the game against Morocco. That would have... The 4 points would have got us through. 4 points would have got us through versus only 16 teams went out of the first round. 32 teams stayed on. Only 4 out of 12 third-place teams went out of the competition. And Scotland somehow managed to be one of them. I don't know whereabouts you are on that spectrum, or on those oppositions. This is your fat ache. Messi is crashing and crumbling to pieces right in front of our eyes. He scored 3 goals in his first game. He scored 2 goals in his second game. He's missing penalties now. And he's not even starting his third game. He only gets a goal. And he only gets that goal because the Jordan goalkeeper thinks it's a mascot that's won. That's a wee mascot there that's won a prize. He's taking a free kick. I'll just stand out the way of this one. Jordan scored. They scored when they saw Messi was coming on. It caught on the big screens. They saw Messi's getting ready to come on. They were so enthused because they know it's like playing against 10 men when he comes on the park. So he's, this is brilliant. So they went up and actually got their goal. He's actually fading. He's getting worse and worse right in front of your eyes, Lionel Messi. But you love him. You absolutely love him. And yet Steve Clarke, first qualifying campaign, he only gets us into the play through the Alec McLeish Nations League chance that Alec McLeish had left him. Next qualifying campaign, he finishes second in the qualifying group. Third qualifying campaign, he finishes second in the group, but we qualify. We go through. Fourth qualifying campaign, he tops the group. and we qualify straight for the World Cup. He's had 4 qualifying campaigns, and he got us to the finals in 3 of them. He's actually getting better. We drew 1 game at Euro 2020. That was the best result we got. We drew 1 game at Euro 2024, but that was away from home. That wasn't in the British Isles. That wasn't in the UK. We're only playing games at Hampden in that one. That was tougher, and we still got a draw. That's actually an improvement. In the third tournament he's qualified, we won. We won a game in this one. We've actually got a win. He's getting better right in front of your eyes, but yet somehow you want rid of him, and you think Lionel Messi is absolutely fine. You get what you deserve. Steve Clarke has resigned and let the bye-bye Steve jibes begin as Scotland begin to look for a replacement who can get them the very nearby. They went bye-bye into Euro 28. Well, 24 teams out of the 55 in Europe qualify for Euros, so that's kind of like a bye into the Euros. But then it's been hosted by the home nations, and the way they've set it up, that 2 of the 4 home nations have got to really get there somehow. It's like a bye-bye for the next home nations. Scotland are officially out of the 2026 FIFA World Cup Reaction Pod, coming to you in association with Gersnet. Check out Gersnet during the club season every Friday 9 p.m, every Sunday 9:30 p.m, live on the Gersnet YouTube channel. I'm coming to you in association with Gersnet and also with STV Radio. Sometimes we forget we're live, you mad smelly hun bastards. That's STV Radio there. My name's Alec Anderson. Where the cars go by all the day and night, why don't you say what's so wrong tonight? Pray for me, praying for the light. Baby, baby, let's go out tonight. I met Paul Buchanan in Ashton Lane in the West End. I was in the West End yesterday. I was doing the old Ashton Lane, having a pint with my better half. Ended up gnawing more as well. Just total cliched day out in the West End. Absolutely loved it. Trying to get away from the fitbin and all that. Trying to get away from everything. Just having a wee start to the holidays. And I always think I met Paul Buchanan in Ashton Lane years ago, so maybe that's why I always think about it. My mate Andrew, he forced me into his company that night. He knew nothing about the Blue Nile except I kept playing them for him every time he came into my place. That's fucking Paul Buchanan up there. Jesus, and he's we're in Bar Brel, Jacques Brel, the bar's named for him. There's Paul Buchanan, an amazing voice, stands up at the bar talking to his mate, and I went up, and eventually they embarrassed me to go up into his company, and he couldn't have been lovely. It was absolutely lovely. I tell this story all the time. My mate Andrew, he died, and that's the song I just thought about when he was away. And I've always thought about Glasgow. Obviously, when I used to stay in a Drossen, when I first heard the Blue Nile, I come off Central Station, which has been through bad times recently, and out onto Union Street in the HMV that used to be just right opposite the kind of side entrance, that Union Street entrance or exit, the steps at Central Station. You know, the Hibs and the ICF and Hibs were having that fight with the guy was biting the guy's ear and was hanging on, they wouldn't let it go. It's representing. But I remember coming down, it must have been about 1984, and getting in there, and the HMV across the road, it was an afternoon, and I was going up specifically to buy records and just be a teenager. Glasgow was so exciting, and I walked into that HMV, and they were playing Tinseltown in the Rain. Just the loudest. There was only about me and 2 other folk in the shop, a big shop, and it was booming, and it was like, this is unbelievable. And that really helped me always think about that. I always think about Glasgow, and my romanticising, kind of idealising Glasgow as a hick for the sticks. But I always end up thinking about the West End when I hear that song. I think I used to think about rainy Glasgow tenements. Just the whole of Glasgow always seemed really glamorous to me. My wee cousin was in York Hill with leukemia at that time. York Hill sick kids, so we'd go up to Glasgow, and when I was like 14 years old and all that. So I used to look out over you're up in the, I don't know what floor it was at York Hill Hospital. He survived. He's fine. David, it was a bit of a miracle. the stuff he went through, but he used to be up there, York Hill Hospital, looking out over Glasgow, over to Ibrox and all that. I thought, oh, it's amazing, I've got to come in, live here on the Blue Nile as part of that soundtrack. That's the kind of Scotland that I like, that modern idea of Scotland. Doesn't sound like, I don't know, it's something like Jimmy Shand and all that, but and the Associates, probably the greatest for me, the Blue Nile, and the Associates, Billy Mackenzie and Rankin, their Party Fears 2, you know, unbelievable, maybe the greatest Scottish song of all time, and yet doesn't sound Scottish in that kind of cliched, horrible way. And I want to see that's what's happened with the Scotland team. I want to see that's what's happened with the Scotland national team. We've got to get out of this funk. That's not a corny music reference. How you doing, folks? Sorry, my name's Alec Anderson. I'm the Tim Vickery, the kind of fat, bald, pasty Tim Vickery, who's never seen La Dolce Vita. I don't think I've ever seen La Dolce Vita. And I've certainly never been to South America either. I don't think I've seen La Dolce. I think I've seen about half of the Bicycle Thieves as well. I'm doing different genres there, but it's Italian cinema and that. That's a weird one. My name's Alec Anderson. I can remember, Elliot Anderson, I can remember, no relation, when Nottingham Forest and Manchester City having like record-breaking transfer interactions on about Trevor Francis and Ian Wallace. You know, guys who've scored at Hampden. Different guys who've scored. Or it was a penalty for Trevor Francis in a shootout against Aberdeen, but he played for England at Hampden as well, didn't he? Trevor Francis played for Rangers, and Ian Wallace didn't play for Rangers, but that's the kind of stuff. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. It's the Hats. That's the album. The Blue Nile. Hats was the album, and Hat in my Glasgow house here. I had to join in. The Scotland are in the World Cup fever. A few folk in the streets from the boot had put up, you know, saltires in their window, and folk have got wee saltires in their car and all that, and the kids in the street are all running about with the Scotland tops and stuff. And so you don't want to be. I don't like the Tartan Army thing. I think it's a bit self-defeating at times. But these guys are going to the game. They're going to the World Cup. They're paying the money to travel. I don't travel with Scotland except to Wembley. That's the furthest I've ever travelled. So I think a lot of them are going over for themselves, and most of us are really at some level when we're travelling for the football. But it's a kind of look at us type thing. Where I want to go for the football and just let folk know that I've been. I want to go because I care, you know, but I can't afford it and I don't care that much, obviously, so I can't criticise people for it. And it's brilliant that they're giving Scotland a great reputation and all that, and they're representing, and there's people there to cheer the team on. It was really impressive to see the size of the supports, but particularly, obviously, in Foxborough for the two World Cup games there, and at Germany in Euro 2024. It was ridiculous, the level of support Scotland took over there, but my World Cup fever, it's all in here, and it's all in here. In terms of actually showing it, the furthest I got was going to the friendly against Curacao and putting that bonnet behind me, see up there, my official SFA, what's the travel club? I don't know what it's called now. I would pay my £40, £30, whatever it was, every 2 years to get priority for tickets, and it ended up that when I didn't do it for the first time in ages. It cost me a ticket for the Denmark game, which is probably the greatest game at Hampden of the modern era, because I wasn't bloody there after all the games I had been to at Hampden. It was absolutely miserable before and during Steve Clarke's reign. But you'd send you stuff. It's like your My Gels, you know, you renew it and you'll get little. They'll send you like badges or stuff like that, little tokens of their thanks. But it was at one point I got that hat, which is too wee for my big head. You know, Scotland, literally in a nutshell. But I put that in the window, I've kind of propped it up, the wee kind of hall window we've got, so anyway, angel that are walking about, are folk, but he's definitely supporting Scotland, because I think, you know, folk might know my Rangers supporter. You don't want them thinking you're one of these kind of, because I really look like a gammon. You don't want to think you're one of these guys who like hates Scotland, you know, because you support Rangers. No, I'm not getting into all that, you know. I'm not against England either. I'm quite happy to cheer on England now in the World Cup. I'd never cheer them on, that kind of nonce behaviour, but a Scotland fan. But I would want England to win the World Cup, really. But the hat went in the window, and I'd been out, you know, thinking about hats, and I went out during the day in the West End in Glasgow, and it was baby, let's go out tonight, and Scotland did go out tonight on Saturday night. It was just the clock struck midnight. I think it was just the clock struck midnight. It was in the what was it? Ghana against Croatia game. Sorry, folks, I'm really dragging this out. I'm dying in my arse here because a few drinks when I come home as well. So suffering on the Sunday, but Aye, the pipes, the skirl of the pipes, a mournful event for the pipes, and I could hear in my head. And an hour before that had been the flaming lips at Kelvin Grove Bandstand. It was reverberating around the whole of the West End of Glasgow there. But I got the hat out the window and went and sat down. But no amount of shortbread or whiskey or porridge or iron brew could cheer me up. It's been a long, long time coming, and Scotland's exit typically was absolutely fucking tortuous. Totally tortuous. An unreal extended agony. Ecuador beat Germany. South Africa beating South Korea. That 3 points was indeed enough for progress from third place. That was maybe 3 points, but it was good enough for progress from a third placed team in this World Cup into the last 32. It was good enough for Senegal, but no one else. Iran, South Korea and Scotland, we also finished in 3 points, but Senegal were the only ones to do it on a positive goal difference, and Scotland were bottom of that particular mini league as well. The team's on 3 points in third place. Only Uruguay on 2 points finished below us in the third place ranking league. If there's an agonising way to exit a tournament, Scotland will sit it down, hand it a baseball bat with nails in it. I'll get a cup of tea and a bit of nice music on. You're comfortable. Agonising way of exiting a tournament. You're right there, aye. Good. And then Scotland, we'll just turn round and we'll drop our kecks and we'll bend over the table and we'll just say to them, take your time. Just do whatever you've got to do. Enjoy yourself. You know what I mean? Gerard Butler was at a few of the games. Wasn't he? At least one of the games was a close-up of Gerard Butler, one of the Scotland games at this World Cup. One of the three at this World Cup. And Gerard Butler, he was in that film, wasn't he? Is it Law-Abiding Citizen? Horrendous film. One of the horrible ones where horrible things have got to happen to a wife in Wayne's, so that the protagonist is that we can guilt-free watch just unlimited violence, torture and stuff like that, because it's been done for pure Puritan reasons, for merciful reasons. And there's a bit in it where because one of the guys that's killed his wife and kids in the home robbery or whatever it was, and he paralyses the fella, but it also keeps him awake. This cocktail of drugs he feeds him, so he can tell the fella. He gets him to a warehouse and all that. He's got him strapped down and all that. But he doesn't need to strap him down because he's paralysed, but he's also wide awake, and he's also gave him some other drug that will stop him having a heart attack. And he's telling him as he lies there, this is so I can basically skin you alive. Whatever he's got, it's horrific things he's going to do to this fella. Not quite right. That's if he's killed the wife in Wayne's, killed the guy's wife in Wayne's. But that's what Scotland is basically like when it comes to this World Cup. This particular way of exiting this World Cup was like, well, that's us beat Wednesday night. Brazil 3-0. I finished in third in the group. I mean, -3 goal difference. That's no. There is still a chance, and it's before it. Bosnia had got that winner. They'd clinched it at 3-1 when Qatar were kind of playing them off the park, which meant before that game kicked off against Brazil on Wednesday, we knew that there was at least one team that was going to finish a healthier third than us if we lost to Brazil. And then after we did lose to Brazil later on that same night, as I say, watching the Czechs against the Mexicans, that's the Czechs. Oh, the Czechs take it in Mexico. They're already through. They might have their eye after the ball. They might be resting players and all that. If you go to watch the Czechs finishing on 4 points, that'd be us screwed. Mexico have humped the Czechs 3-0. That's great turnover. South Africa, who'd let one venture up the park and 1 point in their name, they beat South Korea, so that they go through, and South Korea end up on 3 points, but with a better goal difference in Scotland. Straight away, that was the first two groups outside ours that had finished, where the team in third were better off than Scotland. Ecuador beating Germany, of course, that was just absolutely fantastic. My favourite was actually when Turkey, they were already out. They were finished in fourth. But they beat the USA. In the USA, we had a 98th minute goal to record their first win at the World Cup in best part of a quarter of a century, to finish with the same points but a better goal difference in Scotland in fourth place. It's almost like, if Paraguay and Australia's draw that condemned us to be unable to finish in a better than the team in third in that group. If that had somehow been ruled to be a bit dodgy by FIFA and they decided to send one of them home, no, that was, you just wanted to try and, that was a fait accompli. I'm just going to send one of these home, and who's next? It's Turkey. They're still, we promote them to third place, they're still got a better goal difference than Scotland. So they just in case we were going to get we're were hopes up. I couldn't even enjoy Thelo AASGAARD outscoring, out-entertaining Mbappe, if not Ousmane Dembele, in the first quarter against France on Friday night, for the news that Senegal, who started on 0 points and a -3 goal difference in third place in that group, were 1-0 up on Iraq already. No points, -7 goal difference Iraq. But so instantly they were better off than Scotland. Before the game had even kicked off, really, I was just sitting, we're going to watch France against Norway, watch Mbappe and all that. And then that was followed by John Champion, who just praised Michael Oliver, the fucking referee, because he's English, for having an assist, as far as he was concerned, for his basically doing his job by allowing play on. So he basically had contributed to one of Dembele's sensational goals against Norway. He told us, John Champion of Iraq, we're going down to 10 men as well as being a goal down. There was no shots on target. I turned over at half time to see what's happening in Toronto between Iraq and Senegal, and apparently there have been no shots on target from either team since then. They made sure that Senegal were winning and they were going to finish in a better third place than us, and then didn't bother playing football after that until the second half, in which Senegal rattled in another 4 goals just to make sure. Ousmane Dembele, that was job done. Ousmane Dembele, I'm watching him like the buses. He got his first World Cup finals goal ever in his previous game, and he had a first half hat trick. Apparently, it was only the sixth. I'm sure it was only the 6th hat trick, maybe in the first round. It can't have been only the 6th hat trick in the entire World Cup, the history of the World Cup. John Champion was saying I never caught it right because I was kind of getting into the depths of despair. But I mean, because Mbappe and Jeff Hurst have scored hat tricks in the final. And like we heard when Vinicius Junior was constantly threatening to score a hat trick against Scotland in Miami, we'd heard that the last Brazilian that scored a hat trick was Pele against France in that 1958 semi-final. So that's 3 straight away. And the other one we're talking about, of course, was Oleg Salenko. He scored a hat trick against, it was a first half hat trick. He scored 5 goals altogether against Cameroon, also in the States in 1994. Roger Miller, he set the record for the oldest guy to score until. Was he still older than that one than the Ronaldo was only the second oldest guy ever to score in the World Cup now. Roger Miller still has it because of the consolation goal he got for Cameroon in that same game back in '94. But it was all Rangers stuff. It was all Rangers. No, AASGAARD, responsible partly for one of Dembele's goals, but starts turning it on around about the half-hour mark. Then he scores. He's heard me name checking him on the last pod I did regarding Derek McInnes taking over at Rangers and wanting his players to try all the time. It's going to be constant effort under Derek McInnes or you're out the door. He tries more often than Raskin, by the way, but I was citing AASGAARD kind of snidely when I was talking about that as one of the people that Derek McInnes might want to look at in that respect. But that's a potential problem straight away for Deeks, for Del Boy. Shankland's made captain probably. He comes into pre-season training, he starts shouting at AASGAARD to get his arse and gear. He's not trying hard enough, and Thelonious just turns around and goes, how many goals did you score in the World Cup? I rest my case. Shut up. So Mbappe didn't score, I think, in that game against Norway in protest over the fact that the drink had been banned in France. They're very go-on strike, aren't they? Very politically active, the French. They don't like being told what to do. So I knew they had to do something to protest the fact that the booze had been banned over there because of the heat. So Mbappe went on goal-scoring strike. Sammy Baird is the first Rangers player to score at the World Cup finals, and he scored at Sweden 1958, and he scored against France. Brian Laudrup was before Friday night there. Brian Laudrup was the last Rangers player to score at the World Cup, and he scored at France, in France in 1998. Of course, he's scoring for Denmark. He scored against Brazil, but he's scoring for Denmark. And Michael Laudrup, his brother, had scored in the same tournament for Denmark, obviously, and he scored against France. And then there we've got Thelo AASGAARD of Norway, the last Rangers player to score at the World Cup. He's scoring against France. There's a kind of France Scandi thing when it comes to Rangers. It made me wish that Sammy Baird had been Icelandic, really, quite frankly. But he's certainly a good finisher. Good finisher. Uruguay into the wee small hours on Saturday morning. Uruguay, that was perfect revenge. That was fucking man. That was totally Pyrrhic. That's a bonus. You can't say we didn't get anything out of this World Cup. Ernie Walker, 40 years on, is back in Mexico as well. They're playing Spain in Mexico in the early hours, our time of Saturday morning. Uruguay. Just need a point for that game, and they'd go through. And I've constantly, every World Cup pod I've done this summer, I've mentioned the fact that Uruguay are going to do this. Uruguay are going to do it again because in 1986 They knocked us out of third place. It would have put us through with the guy sent off in the early seconds of the game, but 10 men in nets. They fight to the death against us, literally fight. They're disgusting. Scum of world football, Ernie Walker called them after that game, and 4 years later they do us again for the last third place progressing spot the day after we'd lost to Brazil and Turin, but we still had a chance of going through. Uruguay, last minute they score in Udine against South Korea. I'm thinking they're going to do it again. They're going to do it again in this World Cup, but no. They're the only team to finish below Scotland in the third place rankings table. Only team to finish below us, and they get a guy sent off in the last seconds of this game. Like it was a book ending. It was totally poetic. It was completely pyrrhic as well, but it was good. It was good to get a wee bit of something out of this World Cup. The most beautiful part of this World Cup so far, I think, has been those kind of luminous pink three stripes, the three Adidas stripes, the drei Riemen or drei Marke, what they call drei Riemen, is it? In the German, and the top of the Columbia top that matches the kind of pink, day-glow pink or salmon pink or kind of scarlet socks. It's the same colour that they're wearing at their home kit. They've only worn it once, and that was the 1-0 win over, who did they win? They won DR Congo. That was sensational looking kit. I saw somebody wearing it yesterday in Glasgow, and I'm thinking, I know I'm far too old and too fat to really wear anything other than just the whole the fat man outfit. But I would definitely like to get that a football kit. I would definitely take if they did it in triple XL or quadruple XL in my case. But that's nice in Argentina. The tracksuit tops, I've seen them with the white one and the black one, and then they've got that was gorgeous, the black tracksuit top they're wearing against Jordan when they come out for the national anthems, and the black shorts and the black socks. In the traditional Argentina away kit, they've got this massive, mad, crazy pattern on it, but it works. It always works. It's a beautiful dark blue, ironically. The Argentina wear is their traditional away kit, and they've got the dark blue shorts and socks that they've been wearing with their home. Everything Argentina are doing makes up for the fact that they've really messed up. They've really messed up the stripes, the traditional light blue stripes on their jersey. They've overplayed that. They've made a real arse. It's a beautiful kit, basically, and they need to miss it. And then Saturday morning, I got up. I'd been all worried about it, but I'd sat there in the wee small hours, lying in bed, looking at my phone, looking at the BBC Sports app, trying to work it after the high of Uruguay finishing, in third, a weaker third place finish than themselves. Finally, there was one group that Scotland were better than. 3 more to go. Need 3 more, and I think there was 6 groups still left to conclude. At that point, I was doing my week trying to work it out. And I thought, Belgium, they're weird. But I forgot, Belgium, they went out and they beat New Zealand 5-1, which put them top of the table. And they weren't really the problem. It was Egypt and Iran I'd worked to. I would just need Egypt to beat Iran. That's when I woke up next morning. They drew. So that group's done as well. And then I was catching up with Sports Sound. I just wanted something to listen to. I usually listen to Rangers Review, but they're no interested in the World Cup. So I'm listening to Sports Sound to hear what was going on. And I heard the Tom English, Neil McCann thing. I'm fucking pig sick. Tom English, an absolute job's worth. It was disgusting. Neil McCann played for Scotland. I know that's certainly not the case, as we know that people who played the game are necessarily the best at analysing it. But you're talking about Billy Dodds and Neil McCann, guys who played with distinction for Scotland. And Tom English is just, everything needs to be horrible with Tom English. He'll come in when he can be horrible. That's when he'll get involved. It was, who was it? Who was? Oh, was it Russell Martin? Well, we knew we were getting to the end with Russell Martin, and Tom English turns up at his press conference. What can you say you've made better at Rangers? What have you improved at Rangers? Ah, you prick, fuck off. Just horrible kind of ambulance chasing stuff. And there he was in full. And now, I don't doubt there's a bit of racism involved as well. I don't mean because he's called English, but because he's Irish. And you're thinking, what do you know? But the guy's definitely put his heart and soul into Scottish sports journalism. But there's a very kind of private schoolboy jobs worthiness, but it's not about being right, it's about winning. And Neil McCann, because I know you need to stick to because he did this whole thing, Tom English, you'll have heard it. Doesn't last very long, you should check it out. I think it's up on YouTube and that now as well. You don't like to get involved in these things but I don't think this was real rabble rousing. It's just something that can expose what Tom English is all about, and what a lot of sports journalism is about just now as well, where he started saying, and this is the thing, this is where it gets really confusing. It's an emotional time for all of us, and I certainly claim no innocence in this front, far less actually knowing what I'm talking about, far less insight. But he was get on about how Scotland is kidding themselves on. This is just the way they've always been. That's what I'm saying right here. We've never get past the first round. We've always been shite when it comes to major tournaments. And it's so, but he started saying that the games we had won in qualifying were random and didn't count. Somehow we'd managed to finish top of our group in qualifying just through freak results. You're like, well, where were they freak results over the last 28 years of World Cup qualifying? No, we were terrible at Euro 2020 or 2021. We're terrible at Euro 2024, and here we're terrible at this World Cup. We're just going out all the time, and yeah, we are in terms of progressing to the next round. But we're still in a phase where we're getting used to being back at tournaments. But it's the night against Denmark. Scott McTominay. It was freakish goals. Even the 3 freakish goals Scotland scored against the run of play. Denmark went down to 10 men. They were the better team. And the goal, the tap in from Lawrence Shankland, the Poachers Classic for Lawrence Shankland, Shankland himself had admitted that it was going to go in for the corner. So that made it a freak goal as well. I don't know what he said about the 2 Denmark goals. I'm assuming they were amazing. And it was a freak result that the Belarus had managed to get a draw. They'd managed to hold, or did they beat the Danes? They held it. But we got a draw against Denmark and Copenhagen in the very first game, and here we are beating the Danes, who we'd also beaten in the previous World Cup qualifying campaign at Hampden. It's the opposite of freakish, basically. When you pick 4 goals past somebody as opposed to just the 3 that were scoring 1 goal more than them, it kind of proves that you know what you're doing, you know. And the game against Greece at Hampden, which I was at, you win the game 3-1, but Greece were by far the better team. They get beat 3-1. They are not the better team. I don't do that shit when it's Rangers, but it's happened. I don't kid myself on when it happens with Scotland either. But we dominated. It's a hard luck story. You win or you don't. Unless there's actual cheating or corruption of referees or something going on. I don't really believe in the hard luck stuff. I watched that game, and Scotland just needed a 15-minute period, which Greece contributed to win the game. And that's all you need. That is all you need. I mean, you could, by that kind of rubric, by that kind of judgment, you could start saying, well, Brazil, we gave them 2 goals, so in Miami, so it was only really 1-0. They beat us, and that was a bit. No, they get beat 3-0 because we deserved to get beat 3-0 in the qualifying campaign, which we've been building, as I'm constantly talking about. Steve Clarke's qualifying campaigns get consistently better. So there is a pattern of improvement now. But yet it was freakish. All the games that we won, it was just nothing of right. No, everything has to be black or white. Everything's shit or everything's fantastic. And of course with Scotland, and it's that whole tone of you're kidding yourself on. You think the players aren't good enough. The players aren't good. Now, I was saying that in the heat of the moment, and it was roasting here as well as being roasting in Miami. After the game on Wednesday and the wee small hours on Thursday, I too was given it. Yeah, the players are shit. It's basics. It's really Scott McCann shouldn't have been playing. I wanted Grant Hanley to be playing. He's built up a relationship with Jack Hendry. That's that beats anything really. When our centre halves are generally so poor. But this idea that they just weren't good enough, the whole team just wasn't good enough, and that's when Neil McCann comes in and says, "Well, you get John McGinn there, who has just become the first Scottish player since Graham Souness, over 40 years ago, to captain a European trophy winning side. He's captain at Aston Villa, winning the Europa League. Aston Villa are like a top 5 Champions League challengers in the richest league in the world. John McGinn's the captain. He's a legend there. He's a phenomenal player. And he scored 20 goals for Scotland, which there's only 4 players who've scored more for Scotland in our entire history. And you've got Lewis Ferguson winning the Coppa Italia, and he's been fantastic at Bologna, captain of Bologna. Scott McTominay, an icon. Saw him, watched it live in the telly, scoring the goal against Cagliari that wins Napoli Serie A, which is right up there with Argentina winning the World Cup or something. That is, Napoli as a country within Serie A. A different country within Italy. It's only the 4th time they've ever won the Scudetto, and there he was. It was Scott McTominay's front and centre of it. Billy Gilmour, massive part of Scotland being able to maybe control the game against the likes of Haiti. It would give us the base to maybe beat Haiti by more goals, and that game was very hectic. He could have got his foot on the ball and whatever. Ifs and buts and that, but there's definitely, in the heat, and the 2 teams were up against, Morocco and Brazil, being a bit unfair and all that, but it was this, it just wasn't good enough. It was terrible, and it wasn't good enough. It's no good enough. That's why you don't progress. It's not good enough to get through. But the idea that it's completely damaged, so Neil McCann comes in and is raging. He is raging, and Neil McCann is somebody who doesn't hold back. But Neil McCann's an absolute gentleman, a really, really sincere guy, really well-meaning, really kind, and cares so deeply. Obviously, that we get so many shock jock arseholes of which I think Tom English is definitely one, and I definitely get that. I've been around guys who love football, love soccer, but are rugby men or golf men primarily. That's if they had, or maybe even cricket, they're private schoolboys. In the football, there is that basic kind of, and quite right too, probably it's no other life the way it is for, I don't know, maybe the working class person or somebody with working class roots or whatever, and Tom English just oozes that. He oozes that kind of easy contempt. I'm just here to do a job, to drive traffic or to get the headlines or whatever. He was a good analyst in that as well. I mean, he's a decent writer on that, Tom English. You know, there's no doubt he's a hard-working journalist, but what he resorts to then is, you're an angry man. Oh, you're an angry man. Neil McCann, he's very, very, very angry. Yes, he's angry because you've tried to, like, you're laying down this spiel about how we need to wake up, we need to get in folks' face. You're trying to give folk the hard truth. How do you expect them to react to that then? So you're getting a reaction like that, but then you're going off on one because you can't handle it. And you've got to deal with what you've laid out there. You've got to be ready for the repercussions. And Neil McCann wasn't. He's having a go at him over a microphone. Obviously, it's not as if there's a square go or anything. But Tom English is, he's an angry man, And they had a bit at the end, once they kind of got him to calm down, and the rest, because the whole crew's there, the whole panel is there or whatever, over in Miami, and they're trying to kind of laugh it off eventually. It was getting a bit much, and they're trying to bring a bit of peace and quiet. So English and McCann go off air for a bit, and it's like Willie Miller and all that. Willie Miller come in, absolutely class. I agree. See, every single thing that I say about this World Cup, about Scotland, this World Cup, Willie Miller's the only person that repeats it. The next day that agrees with me. He comes out with the stuff that it must be an age thing. Must just be the exact. I mean, he's older than me, Willie Miller, but I grew up. I was going to watch football. That he was a guy. Well, basically, he was lifting all the trophies when I was first going to watch football. But it's quite a thing. But he goes in there and he plays peacemaker. And that then, I think it's Kenny McIntyre who's in charge of the programme. He says, right, okay, there's going to be. We're going 30 seconds each from everybody here, just to have your final kind of summation of what you think of Scotland. Neil McCann never got asked. But Tom English spent his whole, Neil McCann's really angry. He's really angry. I think he's trying to say he's an angry wee man or something like that. Say it to his fucking face. I dare you. But it was like, let it go. Give us, you're a journalist. Don't be there to annoy people, to clipe on people, to characterise people like your colleagues. Tell us what you think about the football. It was a horrible, horrible thing to listen to. And I went downstairs and I looked in the sink and I'd left a tea bag in there for the night before. And you empty the pot out, and the tea bag just goes into the plug hole, and you just put the teapot back down, and I go in and pick up the tea, squeeze it, and I put it in the food bin, you know. But I'd left it there, but I wasn't thinking properly the night before, and it was just kind of sitting there, and the washer on the taps, you know, obviously a bit off, and it was just a wee drip going. So it's like it's wet for the tea, and it's wet for the, and I felt that's what Scotland were just sitting there stinking the night before, and it's all kind of horrible. And I went out and had a lovely time in the West End, a few drinks and all that with my missus, went for something to eat. I come up, watched England Panama. It was really, really boring. England scored their goals in the second half, and all the time you're getting news in. Croatia Ghana, this was our last chance. Ghana had to beat Croatia, I think, by 3 goals, and Croatia went a goal up. There was an equaliser, one last twist of the knife. Ghana equalised, I think, kind of midway through the second half or something, but then we needed Ghana to then hit another 4 goals, I think. And Steve Clarke, he was a goner by full time when it was announced that Croatia had won the game 2-1 eventually. So I took the hat out the window and I just sat back down the news straight through that Steve Clarke had resigned. I mean, DR Congo, they also beat Uzbekistan, despite Uzbekistan taking the lead. They would have wanted DR Congo not to win. And Algeria also did us as well. I mean, I don't think it's no real revenge for them for the disgrace of Gijón, Algeria, but it's a wee bit of revenge perhaps on Bob Valentine, who refereed it. I mentioned this before in my World Cup preview pod, but it's only Uruguay out of all the groups, the 12 other teams in third place, the 11 other teams in third place, only one of them, Uruguay, finished below us. I said this tournament should suit us, because the late kickoffs, British summertime, it's in the system we've got Hogmanay. It's a Scottish thing. Hogmanay staying up for the bells, and it was midnight. It was midnight when, unfortunately, the bells were only tolling for Steve Clarke. Know that these bells toll for Miami Vice. They go to Havana, Miami Vice, and Hemingway, famous character, and Havana, for whom the bell tolls. He knew it quite well, and there's Steve Clarke is totally done. He's John done. He's done. He's done. His job's done. His resignation statement. At first, we thought the resignation statement was only 69 words long. Coming to Sky Sports News, they only mentioned this 69 word excerpt from the entire resignation statement, and they were saying that it's really short. It's really short. It read like a suicide note. You know, I mean, his face and his kind of demeanour. Steve Clarke always looks like he could be one of the guys that's on the cusp of. And my thoughts are going to Hemingway, you know, chewing that shotgun and Ketchum. Papa Hemingway. You know, that's what I called my. Didn't call him Papa Hemingway, but his name was McClellan. But my maternal grandfather. Well, that's what I called him when I was a kid. Before I'd even heard of Hemingway, you know, it was nothing to do with that. So I remember when I started learning about Hemingway when I was kind of late teens, early 20s, and it was nicknamed Papa. I thought it was pretty creepy. I've always thought it was pretty creepy, Papa Hemingway, whatever. But I used to laugh about it as well. But my papa, who sent my mum to the same school as Steve Clarke's mum, just a boy from Saltcoats, and I'm just one from Ardrossan, born to a girl from Saltcoats, Billy Gilmer from Ardrossan, Ben Gannon Doak for Drei. This stuff is real. This stuff is really. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from, Scotland, or if you don't even stay in Scotland, but that's who you're supporting. That's your country. And this team, it's local. It's local, and it's really close to your heart, and it's fucking hard stuff. It shouldn't be hound them out and get them to fuck and all this kind of stuff. It's Steve's his note, his wee suicide 69 word note was composed. It's easy to imagine between Croatia's winner and the final whistle in Philadelphia, because we thought it was only a 69 worder. It was composed in Charlotte, named after a British Queen consort, Charlotte, in a hotel room in Charlotte. In North Carolina, it's named for Charles II. He's resigning in North Carolina. No, it's hotel rooms and suicide notes. There's a lot of suicide notes. A lot of folk off themselves, and he talks about his players. You know, and I wondered if he's kind of slagging off them post-match on Wednesday. It's what decided that he'd had enough. It was time to go. He did likewise after the game we beat Belarus only by 2-1 at Hampden back in October. It was a really poor performance, and he ripped into the players after it. And the players were like, aye, he's right. And they upped the performance, and they end up with that 4-2 win over Denmark. It's absolutely spectacular. But it was more like in the same post-match statement. It was when he was still on the pitch and all that, this thing they insist on doing, and having the immediate post-match reaction on the pitch, and you get the managers to be angry. I thought it was a bit performative at the time for Steve Clarke. I thought he's up to something, and that was good as far as I was concerned. He's trying to get us ready for the second round match that he thinks we might have a chance of getting to or something. I don't know what it was. Or he's trying to protect his own job. I was thinking maybe that's a good thing because I want consistency. He maybe knows that he's the guy that should be in charge. He needs to do something to get everybody back on side, get back behind him, get that momentum going. But it wasn't. I think he was just genuinely pissed off with how we chucked the game through individual errors, and that was fine. That was absolutely fine by me, but I thought he'd maybe look back on that, and it's like blaming the players too harshly, and he's like Alec Ferguson after the 1983 Scottish Cup final, and the next day, it's not good enough, but he's taking it too far. Steve Clarke thought, no, that's it. If I'm starting to get ratty with the players in a real sort of way, no, it's time to go, and the emphasis was all on how much, how proud he was. The proudest thing was them calling him gaffer, being their gaffer. And I thought, yeah, that's depressed stuff there. I hope that guy's not on the edge. It turned out it was a much, much longer statement he'd written there. The best manager ever for Scotland. Just technically, statistically, the best Scotland manager ever. And the better he did, the more hated he was. See Gareth Southgate. We'll see how he gets on. Now he's been replaced, or someone's going to replace him. For some, this is everything Scotland needs to move on. Steve Clarke leaving. For others, it's stunningly bad news that I blame on you. The Rangers fans who don't like the fact that he said bye-bye Rangers. Bye-bye Rangers. Just nothing compared to... I'm not joking, but I don't blame you. I'm all over the place with this World Cup emotionally and that. I don't know what my stance is at all. But I know for some... And I've said to boys that are going with me and that, and it's we can have these conversations. It's never bothered me. I thought it was actually a sign of how good a guy Steve Clarke is. He was getting called a fucking Fenian bastard by the Rangers supporter game I was at, and it was embarrassing. It was fucking, and it's grossly out of order. If you're only remembering him, and I think he did, I definitely think he did use it in the press conference to distract for the fact that Kilmarnock had lost that game 5-0. But he's tapping into genuine upset, which we had brought out in him, because it's fucking disgusting. It's a horrible thing to say and do to somebody like that. And it was embarrassing for us. It was so for his only reaction is to say, "Bye bye Rangers." We're big enough to take that. That's the least he should be allowed. And he's straight away with that. He was, "Oh, bye bye," and bye bye Celtic as well. It's like he's in a speech to the Kilmarnock supporters. Not about us. He's in a speech to the Kilmarnock support at the end of the season after they'd finished third, had a great season. Just so happened that the Sky were there covering it live so they could show it. And it's funny how his note is bye bye Scotland. That's how he's headed it up. His departure statement. But if you think that's him mentioning the fact that we were totally sectarian to him is bad, well, see if you remember that kind of stance on responses to ex-Kilmarnock managers for digging up sectarian football fans when the stuff Derek McInnes has endured from Celtic fans on a touchline for Aberdeen at cup finals and semi-finals, and he said to go back at them, for being sectarian towards him. That's going to come up again next season, so we'll think you kind of have it both ways. Anybody who thought Steve Clarke was a job's worth, though, is proved thoroughly wrong by him ripping up a 4-year contract extension that was thrown at him, I think, by the SFA in a way at the time that made it look like Ian Maxwell wanted to get on board. It just suddenly, there's a real wave of optimism about Scotland at the World Cup. I think we should get on board with this at the SFA. Are you not in charge of it? Is that no? It almost was like Morrison's deciding they've got to put up the salt tires at the front of the supermarkets. Or the pub, the landlords, the pub folk getting the bunting with all the World Cup flags, the different nations round about the gantry, and the boozers. And that. It was that. I think it was all about the SFA. That John Walker. See, I was attacking the individual errors for players and saying that Scotland just don't have the standard of player, while I'd previewed the World Cup for Scotland by listing all the great players we did have. Andy Robertson won the Champions League, obvious example, with Liverpool. We played in 3 Champions League finals with Liverpool. So I'm saying, we get Aaron Hickey, the guys that have played in Serie A as well as playing in the top flight in England. These guys are at great level. It's actually, and that's what brings it back to being Steve Clarke's fault if they can't go on and get to the second round in a major tournament when he's had 3 goes at it. So it's up for grabs what the actual reason is. But I attacked the basic skills of our centre halves. So I'm just like Carlo Ancelotti, tactically. That's the basics attack them. But John Walker, the fellow who does the Scotland's coefficient account on Twitter, and I think he's going on Blue Sky as well. I think he's also got his own account, John Walker. He's Scotland's coefficient as well, isn't he? He's on the BBC Scotland now anyway, the tactical analyst, really good stuff he does. I just read a couple of his things. I've not really read all of it, but he brought me back round to my initial position, which was that we do have the players, because we do. I don't know, I think he was certainly implying that the problem with the first 2 goals we conceded to Brazil, was that the players had been coached into how to deal with this obvious Brazil tactic. Brazil had done the same thing against Haiti and against Morocco. I wouldn't even call it a tactic to me. It's just, like I said at the time, my post-match reaction. Your forwards should always be kind of jogging about. I mean, obviously, Lawrence Shankland, he's playing a lesser team, poorer quality team, so he's not got the kind of license to run about trying to shut down Brazilian defenders, but he's got to be ready to rock anytime you get the ball forward, but got to conserve his energy. Brazil just seem to be, what I'm trying to say is just jogging about doing the basic thing of, if you're a striker, if you're up front, you're a midfielder, and the opposition have got the ball in their own box, well, just push up on them and try and shut them down, make it hard. No, you're looking for crumbs, but Scotland were giving them like entire pan loaves. It was unbelievable. So I'm saying that's because of the players. That's just, they don't have the skill, basic skill, just to pass a ball to their fullback. But that's John Walker saying no. Brazil had done the same thing against Morocco and against Haiti, so Scotland knew what they were going to do. They'd have analysed the 2 Brazil games, obviously, and this was their attempt to work their way through that. And it had to been coached well enough. So, like Kenny McLean, you can see Kenny McLean doesn't know how to. He's coming back, facing his own goal, and he's surrounded by Brazilian midfielders. So it's no safe for him to take the ball. He's got to knock a harsh fastball back to his centre half, so you're now under more pressure. And Andy Robertson wasn't far enough up the left wing, or he wasn't far enough back to take the ball more comfortably off Scott McKenna, who had a kind of difficult ball from Angus Gunn. It wasn't well enough coached, and I know the implication there is Steve Clarke hasn't done. I think Scotland, basically, Steve Clarke has known what we have to do tactically in every game, but the difficulty is, you're at a World Cup finals, you've only got days in between each game. the players aren't good enough, possibly aren't gelled together well enough? Is that the manager's fault to be able to adapt, to play different tactics in short order, which is what you have to do in tournament football, when you're, especially when you're a nation of Scotland's size and capabilities? But I don't know. But he's implying we don't have the coach. Maybe I know I've not read enough of his stuff, John Walker, but it was interesting. But he definitely says that the reason that McKenna and Henry were caught out on Wednesday was the players not knowing what their positions were meant to be. The heats, you've got the heats. I've just tried to take on board all possible reasons for this failure to progress. I think in Foxborough in Massachusetts we could deal with it. It was a nighttime kick-off. It was darker. It's maybe a bit cooler over there on the East Coast, although still absolutely roasting. In the two games there, we were only won by a single goal, lost the other one by a single goal. Tight affairs. We were competing. We should definitely compete against Haiti, but against Morocco we're really good. I think ended up being really good against Morocco. In Miami, it's an earlier kick-off. It's further south. It's brutal. And you're playing against Brazil, who heat is just not a problem. And the draw, the fact that we had Brazil and Morocco, was it 6th in the world and 7th in the world, seemed really weird. Didn't Gary Neville last night after the England game talking about the news that Clarke had resigned, saying England the way they were playing just now? Because the tournament teams need to improve as tournaments go on. He said they would struggle to get out of that group, a group with Brazil and Morocco in it. We'd no Billy Gilmour, I say, and I think particularly against Haiti, that would have made a massive difference. It could have got us enough goals, maybe to... No, maybe not. But the question is, do we panic or do we persist? We seem to have panicked. Does Clarke... Is it some sort of move? Is he wanting a petition to get back on? Is it another media-savvy move by Steve Clarke? He needs to keep getting investment from the country, so... He's trying to work something, trying to get something. I think that's what I quite like about Steve Clarke, the way he tries to gouge. Gordon Strachan was the same, just trying to gouge some sort of momentum out of the very little we have to work with. Or is it just 7 years of no second round? That's it, he's done. He doesn't want to know. It's time to go. But I don't think, is it another kind of state of the nation rethink, a lot of navel gazing, another McLeish report? I was certainly giving it all that the other night. You do that in the heat of the moment. Everything's got to change. The kids have got to get coached different. Like Andy Halliday's on Radio Scotland. I was listening. It was the other day, but I'm listening to it the Sunday morning, and he was talking about the B teams should be in league football. They should be playing in the lower leagues. And Rangers and Celtic withdrew. The Hearts still doing it. I don't know. I lost interest in the lower league the minute the Rangers B team came out of it. I went along to Dumbarton to watch the Rangers B team playing like Gretna 2008 and stuff like that. But he's thinking that's something they should do to develop players, get them out there on loan, as we're doing now. There's these agreements going on with championship clubs to develop players, but there's always this thing gets mentioned, and I think it's a bit bogus, that it's the domestic setup, the club setup to get to improve the national team. They definitely need to be producing players. That's down to the domestic setup. That's the Scottish clubs are going to be the ones rearing Scottish players most, and that's, you can have a good go at it, but Brazil, I think hardly any of the Brazil team are actually playing in Brazil, are they? They're all reared by Brazilian clubs, and most of them. But I mean, like Messi is the greatest player in the world right now, still. And he had 2 minutes at Newell's Old Boys under-6 team. Then he's over. I mean, they called him the Catalan, didn't they? Horribly for a couple of decades almost in Argentina, because he was always so good for Barcelona, but couldn't quite produce it for Argentina. It was practically Catalan because he was so almost not Argentinian. A lot of the great teams like Norway, the best Norwegian players, none of them are playing in Norway, are they? Well, obviously the boy plays for Bodo Glimt. There'll be a few of them playing in Norway just now because Norway's got so much money as a nation, they can afford it, but their clubs are tiny. As soon as they get a chance, the Norwegian players are heading to Italy, Germany, England, Scotland, whatever. So I don't know if it's all about the domestic situation, what's happening there with the production of players, but the player quality is a problem for Cape Verde, and yet they remain in the tournament. Uruguay, they've gone home early, and they've got some fantastic world-class players in their team, and Uruguay are a phenomenal football nation. They really are. What they've done internationally is unbelievable. A couple of World Cups, the Copa America, isn't that? But so maybe it's just a case of sometimes these things happen. Sometimes you just go out of tournaments. You have a bad tournament, but the problem is it's the only thing that's ever happened to Scotland. 9 World Cups, no second rounds. It's a record. It is an actual record for the World Cup. We see what it did for the kids here. So Scotland could just be having a bad tournament this summer, It could just have been a bit off when we nearly did it. You equalise against Morocco, and Willie Miller, again, the only other person I've heard mentioning this, Willie Miller talking about the fact that Scott McTominay, that game against Morocco, we started creating really good chances in the second half. He's so determined to get in the end of them sometimes that he was getting in the way of better options who were lining up a clean shot on goal. For Scott, it's just these little 2 penalty shouts. And I think even better was the red card shout. That was in the first half. I think there should have been a red card for Morocco. You never know how that's going to play out, though. We're going to miss the penalties, make us feel worse. You know that playing against 10 men, pressures on Scotland doesn't suit our psyche. Maybe Morocco end up winning 3-0 with 10 men. You don't know how it's going to work, but things like this, the problem is you can't say that for Scotland because it always goes like this. So you've got the weight of basically 70 odd years of World Cup qualifying, of tournament football, not getting past the first round is going into that's no fair on the actual, because it's different players every time. It's a different setup every time. You see what it did for the kids in the country. Like my wife's a primary school teacher, and the kids are loving it. Scotland being the World Cup and all that, you know, and seeing stuff in Reporting Scotland and all that. Wayne's going crazy. It's having assemblies where they're all getting kit on, and they're all no Scotland, no party, and all that. That's absolutely phenomenal. So this should be a government level thing. You know, Westminster and Holyrood, just get us the players, and it's the players that have not yet been born. It'll not be long. That's one thing. You get to my age, the decades fly in. You know, I'll not be around to see it, but before you know it, we could have a team that's good. If we could just get something sorted at grassroots level. Steve Clarke achieved, you know, even the Nations League, getting us up into League A and the Nations League and fighting like hell, and taking it to the playoff and winning the first leg of the playoff in Greece, the relegation playoff, and beating Croatia at Hampden and beating the Poles in Poland. It was tremendous what we've done in the Nations League under everybody who's managed Scotland in the Nations League, Alan McLeish and Steve Clarke, but done fantastically there. And as I said, it's just improvement upon improvement in the qualifying campaigns and getting us to 3 out of 4 finals. The demerits, the bad thing for Steve Clarke, we had periods where we would lose. Even that he would make sure we were losing in the right way at the right time. We were getting beat 3-0 by Republic of Ireland at Lansdowne, or the Aviva Stadium, after we'd lost 3-0 or 3-1 at home to Ukraine in the playoff, the qualifying playoff for the last World Cup, the 2022 World Cup. We get Ukraine. Ukraine are also in our Nations League group, so we scalp them 3-0 at Hampden next time we play them, and we beat the Republic of Ireland at Hampden, and we win that Nations League group, and we go up, we get promoted into League A, and then we end up just qualifying directly for Euro 2024. And it was improvement upon improvement. But we got us to the three finals. It recorded 1 win, that was against Haiti, 2 draws, against England at Wembley, which is probably arguably still his finest result in a major finals, and because England went on to the final, and the draw with Switzerland. Switzerland. We only scored 4 goals across these 3 finals tournaments, and one of them was scored by Tony Rudiger of Germany against Germany on OG. But we've played in 13 finals tournaments in total, Scotland. In our entire history, 13 times we've qualified for a tournament. 5 World Cup wins. We've won 5 games out of 9 World Cups that we've got to. And we've won 2 games out of 4 Euros. 2 games in the Euros. That's all we've ever won. So what is this idyll that we can now return to? This finals is literally the longest. This World Cup is literally the longest we have ever lasted at a tournament. Just because of the process, because of the way it's set up. This tournament, we had to wait around for an extra 3 days, basically. But that's it. That is progress. That is when you're fighting tooth and nail to take yourself on this kind of step change, this massive one-off improvement, this barrier that we need to get through. This is how it happens. When you have to acknowledge, right, it doesn't happen. So we need to take on board anything we possibly can while trying to revolutionise it at grassroots. The people who are out front, the coaching team, the actual first 11, the Scotland national team, need to be out there trying to cling on to anything. And you've got to take that. You've got to take the fact that this is the longest we've ever lasted and try and turn it into a positive, because I don't know. We're the best team in the world, every second year from 1872, inventing international football. We are 0-0 doing it at Hamilton Crescent there, doing it the cricket in Partick, playing the first ever recognised international football match in the world. Scotland are in there, and we'd be the best in the world, or England would win the home internationals, and they'd be the best in the world because the home internationals is the de facto kind of true World Cup. As it's Scots and English that are taking football to the rest of the world at this point in time. Basically, there was nobody else had learnt the game to the point where they knew they could scalp us easily. That was the great days for Scottish football. But that's maybe lasted up until 1930, basically, when the World Cup started. Scotland could claim to be intermittently, when they won the home internationals, the best team in the world. They made great results over England in the Victorian period and that. But it's either up until 1930 as a period we're trying to get back to, or is it up until when we realised we could no longer kid ourselves on, delude ourselves that we were amongst the best team in the world. That probably up until 1954, when we went to our first World Cup, and we found out big time that we were just so far that the world had left us behind. So this is literally the longest we've ever been. So I don't know, the obstacle is the way through. It's not the stoic stuff you see online on YouTube. The obstacle is the way. It's not an obstacle, it's actually the way you get through. Is that the way we should be treating it? I think it is. Maybe we should just stick with it. I thought we should have stuck with Steve Clarke. We can diagnose exactly where it went wrong. And I remember Dick Advocaat coming in as Rangers manager on the Champions League, and you learned exactly where it was you were going wrong, because he took it as consistently getting to the point of getting out the group stage of the Champions League for Rangers, the way the Champions League was set up back then, late 90s, early 2000s. And all right, well, just need one more player. We just need somebody that's going to stamp on Oliver Kahn as opposed to letting him stamp on us. That's you got to get through, get that close, and that's what's happened with Steve Clarke. You can name the moments that it's probably gone wrong in this tournament. Individual errors against Brazil, failing maybe refereeing decisions against Morocco, and failing to take chances that you can totally recall them. That's, I don't know, the tough draw, etc. And all the years of second round, failing to get to the second round is maybe making us overreact as to what's happened in this one. But I think Steve Clarke had already taken the kind of temperature of the nation. It's in a perverse way that it's decided what the nation actually thinks about it through people who are just doing it to get attention online, to sell newspapers. If anybody still does read newspapers, he knew before the World Cup how it would go down. If he didn't get through to the second round. The contract extension, they say that was all about the SFA. Extended his contract by 4 years a month ago. And the last... I think the last 3 days in that hotel in Charlotte. Sorry, I'm just thinking about something. I'll tell you, the last 3 days in that hotel in Charlotte is giving him all the time in the world to check out social media and listen to what's been said on Radio Scotland and all that, and confirm exactly what he knew 3 weeks ago. Steve Clarke doesn't get to the second round. There's no point in trying to continue. It's gone. As I say, he might have his reaction after the game when he got the microphone shoved in his face after the game against Brazil, when he lashes out at his players. Maybe he's thought, nah, I love these guys, and if I'm getting crab out with them, properly crab it, then maybe it's time to go. He's had enough. He's in his early 60s. A future Celtic manager, as far as I was concerned. Maybe that's gone now. They're into 74-year-olds. That Steve Clarke's got 12 years to work his way up to the Celtic job. I don't know. But he's decided to go, and the revolution in player production. So I'm just thinking about good Charlotte there. It's he's in Charlotte, the hotel's in Charlotte. It's the Scotland base, and I thought all that was done really well. I remember Argentina 70 and all the preparation for Scotland sometimes going to World Cups was absolutely shocking. We're getting to the stage where just nailing everything really. But that 4-0 win over Bolivia, we're sitting in Bolivia. I think they beat Brazil in the qualifiers. They were the team that they lost the international playoff, Bolivia, from the CONMEBOL qualifying campaign, so they just missed out in the World Cup. I know they're no interested, but because they're not playing at the World Cup, it's scalped them 4-0. Beat a team from South America 4-0. That's unbelievable for Scotland in terms of the friendly that we played in the heat of New Jersey the week before the World Cup started, and the base we've had arranged in Charlotte and all that, and then the training and doing it in Miami before it. It's fantastic stuff, top level stuff. You need to keep going, you need to build on that, and just getting rid of the guy at the helm of it. A lot of it's maybe the wrong thing to do, but the base was in Charlotte. That was the players are sitting in that hotel for the past few days, and I'm just thinking, it just always makes me think good Charlotte. I used to watch Kerrang. I used to love coming in. I don't know when this would be, early 2000s, coming pissed for a night out or whatever, or just something, just sitting flicking through the TV. Before you really properly into YouTube and all that and streaming stuff, it would be the music channels on the telly. And we'd go to MTV, maybe sitting with my missus or something, and we'd just be Friday night chilling out or something if you couldn't afford to go out or what. And we'd go through all the music channels and listen to flick between the various genres. And I loved a bit of heavy metal, a bit of rock. It's kind of fun. I'm not heavily into heavy metal or anything like that, but when you had a few drinks, you try to chill out in a Friday night, a party atmosphere. I liked a bit of Metallica or something like that, and it used to be quite good carrying. And then it just suddenly, I maybe hadn't watched it for a year or so. And I come back on, watch a bit of, and I liked it, even like Blink 182, wasn't too bad either, wasn't. But you just realise you're too old. This was this Good Charlotte, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. That was, and that's what it seems to be now, Kerrang. Every time you click, I don't know if it's even on the telly now, but you would think, these guys look mean, these guys look pure hard, and then they would come out with this Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous. They've got the spiky haircuts and stuff. They're kind of half punk and half. It's obviously all for teenage lassies. They're just boy bands but they're on Kerrang. And I thought, that's maybe my problem with the Tartan Army and all that. I don't want to go back to the days when I remember the Tartan Army being totally fucking racist and hooligans and all that. You don't want to go back to that. But I don't want to go back to that. Sorry, but it feels like it's not got the same. We've got to, and I was encouraged by how many Scotland fans in the kilts and all that are getting interviewed, doing the vox pops and that after it's been announced that Steve Clarke had resigned, and like, good, because they're there to win. They're now getting that. It used to be, well, we're just here for the beer, we're here for the party and all that. But now it's like, no, fucking get them going because we're getting beat. I'm sick of it. So I don't think Steve Clarke should have gone. And I'm really interested to see who comes in. I don't claim to have any kind of much to back that up, except everyone I've mentioned this podcast. But in terms of the attitude to the Scotland support, yeah, that's fair enough. We're getting to that point where we're sick of just being here for the beer. We need to get through to a second round. We're just going to watch how we go about it. I think the revolution in player production that we're always waiting for has got nothing to do with Steve Clarke's remit, except philosophically. Better players will get us to semi-finals and finals of the Euros and the World Cup, but better coaching, better strategy, better tactics and mindset are what's required to get us to the second bloody round of a tournament. We're failing to even get to qualifying playoff, even the playoffs of qualifying. We're only qualifying, then we're failing to get to the playoffs. When Steve Clarke took over, he leaves with a nation sick and tired of never getting to the second round of a major finals. That's actually a tectonic shift. It's like a reuniting of tectonic plates that had parted. The fissure has been sealed up. We're back to what it was in 1998, because we'd just been through 1990, 1986, that run of like 6 World Cups out of 7 or whatever that we qualified for consecutively. It was like, can I get through this first round? Can I get through the first round? We're back to that. That's a major improvement over the last 28 years. I don't think we'll appreciate what Steve Clarke's done until we're hitting a semi-final in a decade's time. Documentaries will be filmed, and Alec McLeish's 3-0 defeat to Kazakhstan will be the kind of prologues and the fade to black. And by the end of the film, hipsters will be correcting you in the street food pop-ups as you discuss how well Derek McInnes did to get Scotland into the semi-finals of Euro 36. Actually, it's really all down to a guy called Steve Clarke. I just watched this documentary the other day, and I'll say, yeah, actually, I was at his first game in charge when there was over 30,000. It was 35,000. It wasn't half empty, but it was far from full. His first game in charge was a qualifier for the Euros against Cyprus, and I was there for his last home game in charge, which was a friendly against unheard of Curaçao in front of 46,444 people. Now, it passed me the kind of firecracker honey infusion dip for my Korean sushi, kung pao, haggis, lasagna dog. I can't reach it from my rascal scooter. It's what I'll say in 10 years' time when folks try to tell us that it was actually Steve Clarke that laid the groundwork for Scotland. You don't say. Well, let's see how England got on with parting with Southgate. That's like that's like a control test as far as we're concerned. Let's see how England got on, because I think he's definitely our Gareth Southgate. It's a very different character, Steve Clarke, but it's the same thing, getting us back to the brink of the furthest we've ever been before. We're probably saving it for Hampden. Maybe we should get a German. Maybe we should get a German. They get Tuchel. Maybe we should get a German as well. Imagine Scotland had a German manager. Imagine Rangers had a German manager. I mean, that'd be brilliant. That's staring us in the face. We should go for that, because they'd be absolutely fantastic. Great nation, the Germans. But we're probably saving it for Hampden. We didn't do it at Hampden in 2021. Let's get into a second round. They do it at Hampden in 2021, Euro 2020. I was there. Nobody else was because of COVID. But we're waiting for the proper Hampden roar before, like England in 1966, we have our finest, most statistical moment. We're going to have it in our national stadium. It's fine, but as England found out in the 60 years after 1966, doing it that way, doing it just near our national stadium, only kind of subsequently heightens the suspicion that it's the only way you could do it. You only won the World Cup in '66 because you played all your games at the World Cup in '66 at Wembley. If we did the same at Hampden, that you won't, it heightens the suspicion that you can't do it again either. For them, it was winning the World Cup. For us now, for over 7 years, for over 70 years, it's been about reaching the second round of a major tournament. Steve Clarke didn't take us the closest to doing it, but he did present us with the most opportunities to do it of any manager that's been in charge of the national team. That's a fact that his fans and his critics can read in two very different ways. He's got us there most often, brilliant, or he's got us there most often, so he's failed most often to get us to the second round. But one thing is undeniable, the last vestiges of it's great just to qualify were wiped out under the management of the man whose main task when he was appointed was to get us qualifying again. The man who ended the longest non-qualifying period in Scottish national team history. We may want a return to the kind of Victorian and Edwardian period levels of supremacy, but we may need to go ultra-modern at grassroots level, a governmental, fundamental, sociological level to achieve that. But in terms of our post-war ambition, the actual ambition itself, Steve Clarke is the man who took Scotland's national team into the 21st century. The tactics were only negative on the field. The mindset wasn't. That was all about getting us forward. As Cape Verde will tell you, sometimes you have to realise how small you are before you can go truly global. Almost, Steve, almost. May your successor be sacked for persistently failing to win any of his quarterfinals.